On a late evening in the street, animals were discussing a certain legend according to which, if a homeless cat falls in love with a human, it can become one of them. Although most of the gathered animals did not believe the storyteller, a large white cat was intrigued by what he heard. During the conversation, it became known that the story indeed resembled a falsehood, yet one fluffy friend dreamt so fervently of it that he was the only one who sincerely believed in it. Reflecting on what he had heard, the homeless pet remembered a high school student he had loved long ago. For this reason, the white cat immediately ran in search of the dear person to him. The next day, the main character was taking exams before the holidays. Having finished with his studies, the young man wanted to go home, but as he passed by his classmates who were planning to go for a drink, they called out to him and even suggested resting together. Yeoul rudely refused them, which greatly angered them, as he didn't even try to be polite to them. As the boy walked on, the guys began to discuss his unbearable character, and the fact that they would not want to be friends with him. This was overheard by the college student, which made him very sad. Although he did not try to get close to anyone, he constantly received such unpleasant comments about himself. People expected more from the young man because of his handsome appearance. Not receiving anything, they were disappointed and left him alone. That's why the boy had no friends and did not want to make any, as he was sure that nothing would change. Leaving the educational institution, Yeoul wanted to call his uncle when suddenly a white and fluffy cat jumped out of the bushes to him. It scared the young man, but also intrigued him. The main character did not even have time to take a closer look at the fluffy friend when a crowd of cat lovers rushed to him. 3 young girls were delighted with him and even treated him to food. The young man then called his relative about part-time work during the holidays. He promised to start work today, as he did not want to waste time. Closer to the evening, when the college student was already finishing his first trial day, his relative informed him that he could have taken his time getting to work and rested first. Yeoul, however, explained that he wanted to earn more money, so the earlier he started, the better. With the money earned, he wanted to buy a video game. At the cat cafe where the boy worked, there were pets, so he was asked to feed them. When the young man poured food for the fluffy friends, he unexpectedly noticed the familiar white cat from the college yard in the house. Of course, the student thought he was mistaken, but this was not the case. He simply could not believe that the homeless animal had made such a long journey from school to the cafe. Late in the evening, when Yeoul was returning home, he was convinced that he was wrong in his assumptions. The large white cat shocked him by coming to his apartment after him. The protagonist reluctantly washed his fluffy companion in his dwelling. It seemed that the white cat was equally displeased with the situation, yet he was given no choice. Half an hour before, when the young man noticed the animal near the entrance door of his house, he was astonished by the fact that it had followed him directly from the cafe. Moreover, the boy was amazed by the very thought that this particular white and large cat had taken a liking to him for unknown reasons. In turn, the cat very persistently rubbed against the college student and meowed, as a sign of confirmation that he wished to accompany him to the apartment. As endearing as this was, Yeoul understood that he should not give in to temptation and bring a homeless animal along with him. For this reason, he tried to refuse the furry friend and verbally explain that it should go back out to the street. In justification of his own decision, the boy told that the white cat could stay and live at his uncle's establishment, and there they would see each other periodically. It seems that the refusal was greatly disliked by the pet, as it did not allow the protagonist to close the door in front of him and forcefully barged into the stranger's dwelling. Then the young man grabbed the homeless animal and attempted to carry it away by force, but it managed to cling its claws onto the furniture to prevent this from happening. In the end, the college student prevailed as he was physically stronger than his fluffy friend. Therefore, he hurried to personally take it out to the street. However, as soon as he did this, the weather significantly worsened and a strong blizzard began. Only this detail forced Yeoul to still keep the white cat overnight. He could not allow it to perish from the cold due to his own fault. As soon as the two returned to the dwelling, the protagonist noticed that the homeless animal was very dirty and was soiling his floor. Without much thought, he carried the pet to bathe in the bathroom. After finishing with the bathing procedures, the boy personally dried the furry friend's fur with a hairdryer. He was amazed that it turned out to be white, not gray. Now, the white cat resembled a cloud due to its fluffy and extremely charming appearance. Unfortunately, the young man got very dirty while washing and drying the animal, so as soon as he noticed this, he immediately hurried to take a shower. The college student undressed and left the pet with his dirty clothes in the room while he went to the bathroom. Then the cat approached the clothes to sniff them. As soon as the white cat was convinced that Yeoul was indeed the person he had previously loved, it rejoiced and went to enjoy life in its new home. Lying on a stranger's sofa, the homeless animal recalled one of the meetings with the boy in the past, as well as details of how he took care of it during that period. Thoughts of this delighted the furry friend, so he quickly fell asleep. A little later, when the pet woke up, he noticed that the young man had already gone to sleep in his room. Of course, he went to him to keep him company. The white cat jumped onto the boy's bed and attentively looked at his peacefully sleeping face. Unexpectedly, he kissed Yeoul, initially on the cheek as a sign of his boundless love, and then on the lips. In the next moment, the formerly homeless animal suddenly, as the legend had foretold earlier, transformed into a real human. At first, the white cat did not even notice its transformation into another creature, silently admiring his beloved young man. When he realized that the legend turned out to be true, he was so happy that he could not believe what had happened. The werewolf examined his new appearance in the mirror. Although he now had the body of a sturdy man, the white ears and tail still remained with him. Unexpectedly, as soon as he was convinced of the reality of his own dream coming true, the transformed pet screamed with joy, almost waking up the young man who had been peacefully sleeping all this time. Immediately after, the white cat sat down next to the boy on the bed again. This time he began to touch his body willfully, obviously wanting to kiss him again. Since the protagonist was asleep, the werewolf was unimpeded in realizing his intention. In a moment, he began to touch the boy's body with his lips everywhere, calling him by name and asking him to wake up. Unfortunately, Yeoul was sleeping very soundly, so instead of waking up, he began to dream about what was happening to him. Moreover, the college student saw the owner of the white tail in his dreams as well. At first, he heard a male voice calling him, and only after did he meet the werewolf, whom he had accidentally sheltered earlier in his apartment. The young man believed that the dream would be pleasant, but as soon as he saw the white cat in human form, he was surprised, for he did not think that his imagination would present him with such a fantasy involving a man with a tail and ears. Unexpectedly, the transformed animal kissed the boy in the dream just as it did in reality. He was very embarrassed, so he began to resist. While the protagonist assured the white cat that he did not want to engage in tactile actions with a stranger even in dreams, the latter continued to touch the stranger's body and do what he wanted. Early in the morning, Yeoul woke up quite surprised by what had happened to him in the middle of the night. He felt awkward that he had fantasized about such things in his dreams, and therefore, not even suspecting the existence of the werewolf, he hurried to work. During the morning bathing procedures, the protagonist noticed strange marks on his neck. He was astonished, for such marks were left by the stranger with ears and tail in his dream. However, since such a thing could not happen in real life, the boy decided that he simply hit something while sleeping. Of course, despite this, memories of what happened at night reminded him of themselves and greatly embarrassed the college student himself. In the end, having somehow finished washing up, the young man pondered what to do with the homeless animal he had picked up shortly before. Without much thought, the young man decided that he could leave it with his uncle for temporary care, as he ran a cat cafe and knew how to take care of furry friends. It seemed that the pet belonged to someone before it ended up on the street. For this reason, he decided to call his relative and inquire about his opinion on the matter. When the white cat heard that they wanted to take him to another person's establishment, he immediately began to protest and interfere with Yeoul's phone conversation. Despite this, the young man was stronger, so he skillfully kept the homeless animal aside, while agreeing with his uncle that he would bring the pet to the cafe that very day. Unexpectedly, the furry friend kissed the protagonist on the lips again and thereby shocked him. At that very moment, he transformed into a human and verbally expressed his protest against moving to the relative's cat establishment. The college student was horrified by what was happening, as he immediately recognized in the unfamiliar werewolf the mysterious man from his dream. Memories made him blush and lose his composure for a moment. Initially, the protagonist thought he was still dreaming, as a naked man with white ears and a tail sat before him. However, as soon as he pinched himself on the leg and realized that this was all reality, he immediately grasped the strangeness of what was happening to him at the moment. Meanwhile, the telephone conversation with his uncle continued, so the boy had to explain himself to him, as he had previously screamed in surprise. Nevertheless, it was quite difficult to do so, as the werewolf's actions prevented Yeoul from speaking normally. Eventually, the college student partially lied to his relative, claiming he had simply fallen off the sofa, hence the scream during their conversation. As he explained the situation, the troublesome white cat continued its strange attempts to make close contact with the young man, similar to what had already happened in the dream, but this time it clearly intended to go all the way. The protagonist was very embarrassed by what was happening, but at the same time, he could not show his emotions until the phone conversation ended. For this reason, without much thought, the young man ended the dialogue with his relative in order to properly communicate with the unexpected object of his own imagination from his dreams. First and foremost, Yeoul ordered the werewolf to stop touching him and then expressed his indignation at the marks on his neck, which were obviously his work and not accidentally acquired injuries. The white cat, however, completely ignored everything the boy said. Instead, he honestly declared his desire for more from him. To confirm his words, the tail owner gently touched the college student's cheek. As the transformed pet insisted that he would now stay with his object of love forever, the protagonist bewilderingly realized that he was in a hopeless situation with a creature that was now much stronger and larger than him. Soon, Yeoul arrived at work with a significant delay, for which his uncle tried to scold him. Surprisingly, the young man took the warning seriously and promised to arrive on time in the future. Before starting work, the relative inquired about the whereabouts of the white cat they had previously discussed on the phone. The college student confessed that he did not bring the homeless animal with him because it was sound asleep. Supposedly, the boy did not want to disturb it. In reality, he simply could not refuse the homeless animal permission to stay with him after the awkward moments that had occurred between them. Earlier, during the so-called preparations for work, the werewolf behaved indecently and continued to insist on more intimate contact with his beloved young man. Yeoul was categorically against this, so he openly informed the transformed white cat about it, but it did not listen to him and continued to fulfill its own desires. At some point, the boy even liked it, as he was able to satisfy his physical needs in the process, but immediately after, he felt very uncomfortable. After completing the unusual actions with the werewolf, the protagonist realized that he was late for work, so he hastily dressed and ran to it. He asked the transformed animal to stay home until he returned. Of course, the white cat was happy to comply with this condition. Throughout the working day, Yeoul reflected on what had happened to him and in his apartment earlier. He found it hard to believe that everything that had happened was real, but most of all, he was worried about the werewolf he had left alone in his dwelling. Soon, thoughts of the pet forced the boy to admit to himself that it was quite attractive in human form. After some time, during a conversation with his uncle, the protagonist realized that he felt uncomfortable even returning home, so he wanted to stay overnight at his relative's place. The boss refused him without hesitation, despite being worried about his saddened nephew, knowing that Yeoul had a white cat at home that needed care and food. When the cat cafe closed for the day and the protagonist had assisted with the main cleaning, his relative let him go home early. Before parting, the young man wanted to ask an important question, but unfortunately hesitated and therefore left the premises mid-sentence. The boy's strange behavior surprised the boss, but he decided to ignore it, only asking him to take care of himself on the way home as a farewell. Yeoul responded indifferently, thereby causing his relative to worry even more. On his way home, the college student pondered how his life had drastically changed since the start of the holidays. These changes were so extraordinary that he couldn't even tell anyone about them. Since his uncle had been his only support, he couldn't possibly tell him about what the werewolf had tried to do with the young man. The thought was too embarrassing for him. Apart from these concerns, the boy was also worried about what to expect from the white cat he had picked up from the street. Yeoul didn't want to enter his apartment because of this. Unexpectedly, when the college student was already near his home, he heard the familiar voice of the homeless animal. In human form, it appeared on the balcony, waiting for the young man. As the pet inquired why the protagonist wasn't coming up to the dwelling, the latter was shocked by the sight of the completely naked werewolf. Therefore, the boy started yelling at the owner of the white tail and asked him to immediately go inside the apartment. He himself hurried into his dwelling, worried that someone might accidentally see his guest from the street in such a state. The white cat was very happy to see him, and as befits an animal, first asked to be fed. However, Yeoul ignored this request and instead started looking for suitable clothes for him. Soon, he ordered the werewolf to wear his clothes, which were too large for the protagonist. Unfortunately, they were too small for the pet. Although he dressed, it became obvious that he was uncomfortable and cramped in the foreign outfit. When he tried to undress again, Yeoul stopped him. He gently asked the homeless animal to wear the undersized clothes until better options appeared. As an argument, the boy stated that if the white cat wanted to become human, he needed to behave like one. This worked, and the tail owner agreed to all the conditions. While the college student was stopping the stranger's undressing, he accidentally touched the guest's firm chest. Now the boy became interested in his toned body to the extent that he unconsciously felt it. These actions embarrassed him, so he stopped. Eventually, the protagonist changed the topic of conversation and went to prepare food for the werewolf. He assumed that since the latter had transformed into a human, he could eat something other than cat food. Unexpectedly, the white cat stopped the young man by pushing him onto the bed. He mentioned that he noticed the boy's interest in chest muscles and therefore, undressing, offered to touch them again. This greatly embarrassed Yeoul, so he started to deny his obvious desire to touch the stranger's body. Despite this, the werewolf stated that he would not deny his own desires regarding the young man. Soon, he resumed his attempts to prove his love for the protagonist through physical contact. Although the latter refused, he no longer resisted the process. When the intimate actions were about to progress to a new, more personal level, the college student still began to express his indignation, as he was very worried. As soon as Yeoul voiced his protest aloud, the white cat returned to his previous fluffy friend form. Although the boy didn't understand the reason for his luck, he was glad to avoid the continuation of the events. The pet, however, had no choice but to accept this. Late in the evening, the werewolf Baeksu watched television, intrigued by a show featuring performances of famous pop singers from his country. Simultaneously, he indulged in chips like a true human while waiting for the protagonist to return from work. Upon the young man's return, the white cat eagerly greeted him and received a small present from him. Yeoul brought the transformed animal different clothes, much larger in size than the previous ones, as they belonged to his uncle. Shortly before, the college student had shown his relative strange photos of people in oversized clothes, calling it a style in an attempt to explain his request to borrow some items. Surprisingly, this plan worked, and the man gave away some clothes. The tail owner agreed to wear someone else's clothes despite them being worn by someone else before. The boy was very pleased with this, as he couldn't afford to buy new clothes for his pet. Baeksu received a whole pile of clothes, but he didn't want to try them all on. For this reason, the white cat pushed everything aside and demonstratively knelt before Yeoul, stating he had no desire to engage in such activities. Of course, this displeased the protagonist, who tried to scold the pet. Unexpectedly, during their argument, the boy mentioned that he found the white cat very cute in his animal form. This slightly astonished the werewolf, seemingly prompting the tail owner to reflect. In a moment, he began boldly touching the young man's body, thus embarrassing him. This had become a routine for the college student, yet he still vividly reacted to Baeksu's affection. During the process, the boy mentally confessed to himself that he liked engaging in such activities with the werewolf, but he did not dare to say it out loud. As the situation approached more embarrassing actions, particularly a kiss, Yeoul suddenly expressed his protest, and at that moment, the white cat reverted to his original form. This gave the protagonist some understanding of when and why Baeksu's transformations occur. The next morning, while working at the cat cafe, his uncle suggested they live together, which greatly shocked the young man. He immediately declined the offer, arguing that he didn't want to become the object of his relative's excessive care. The man explained that he simply valued his nephew very much and was always happy to spend time with him, despite the fact that he was growing up quickly. During the conversation between the two, the boss asked the boy if he had named his pet. He replied that he named it Baeksu because it means unemployed. Although the uncle was surprised by this, Yeoul pointed to the lazy and constantly sleeping white cat, indicating that he had made a good choice. When the workday ended, the college student called his fluffy friend, and they went home together. On the way back to the apartment, the protagonist smiled as he remembered the experiment he had conducted with Baeksu's transformation. Every time he refused the pet, it instantly reverted to its original form. Although the young man considered such actions too harsh towards the white cat, he couldn't protect himself from overly tactile actions otherwise. Reflecting on this, the boy mentally admitted to himself that he wanted to see more in the werewolf than just a pet. At that moment, Baeksu kissed him as they had returned home, which meant he could become human again. The tail owner did this without warning, greatly embarrassing the protagonist. Despite this, it seemed that Yeoul enjoyed what was happening. Although this was the case, the young man didn't miss the opportunity to grumble at the white cat for such a stunt. In response, the latter hurried to kiss him again. After finishing such an embarrassing action, the werewolf informed him that the boy was obliged to take responsibility for taking him in and making him his pet. This news greatly shocked the college student, but he didn't argue, only doubting whether he could fulfill this responsibility. Shortly, the protagonist taught the werewolf Baeksu how to write. He tried hard, but it was evident that he did not enjoy the activity. The young man noticed that the transformed animal disliked the learning process, but he could do nothing about it, as knowing the basics of the language was essential for a normal life in the human world. Unexpectedly, during the lesson, the doorbell rang. The boy assumed it was the delivery person, so he went to answer the door. As soon as he was distracted from closely observing the others learning, Baeksu immediately forgot about the alphabet and, grabbing the TV remote, decided to entertain himself in his favorite way. Yeoul had been ordering food repeatedly, as they required much more for the two of them than he did alone before. When he noticed that the werewolf started doing things other than what was required of him, the boy turned off the TV and scolded him for it. The protagonist behaved like a parent, as he considered it extremely important to teach the pet the basic rules of writing. Therefore, he explained that until the daily lessons were over, the white cat could not rest. Baeksu disliked this news, but he had previously promised to learn obediently, so he now had no choice. As the college student unpacked the groceries, the werewolf noticed the box in which they were stored. Without much thought, he decided to climb into it, like the animal he was. As soon as the tail owner was inside, he felt happy. However, the box immediately collapsed due to the creature's large size and the groceries scattered around the room. This greatly angered the protagonist, as it added even more mess to the apartment. For this reason, he scolded the transformed pet for the mischief he had caused. Only later, when the young man realized he had overdone it with negative emotions, he tried to explain to the white cat that with the change of form, his size had increased, so fitting into a small box simply would not work. The werewolf took note of this and approached the boy to help prepare the meal. This attention from Baeksu made the college student feel embarrassed, as he mistakenly thought he would be approached with excessive attention, kisses, and other caresses again. This did not happen, which made Yeoul feel ashamed of his own thoughts. It seemed that he was the only one who really desired those actions but hid it. While reflecting on this, the protagonist noticed a peculiarity in the pet's behavior. For the first time ever, he decided to help with something on his own. The boy was so surprised by this that he even thought the tail owner was acting this way for the chance to watch TV, but it turned out not to be the case. The information pleased the college student, so he hurried to thank the white cat for the help with head pats. This gesture surprised the pet. Moreover, Baeksu was embarrassed by the received affection, and in turn, the protagonist asked him to help with household chores more often. The werewolf agreed to everything, just to get a little more attention from the young man. Mentally, he noted that this way, he could initiate actions from Yeoul. Late in the evening, after the boy took a shower, he realized he was very tired from the day. Therefore, he decided to go to bed early and honestly told the white cat about it. The cat was already waiting for him in bed, which slightly embarrassed him. It seemed that the college student remembered past close contacts with the werewolf, making him feel awkward. Despite this, he heeded the request of the transformed animal to lie down next to him. When they were in bed together, it became clear that the protagonist was expecting some actions from Baeksu. Surprisingly, the werewolf just hugged the young man and wished him a good night. Such distant and decent behavior from the white cat greatly amazed the boy. Therefore, while the pet slept, he observed his sleeping face with slight bewilderment. In the end, he admitted that he found him cute not only in animal form but also as a human. On another workday for the protagonist, as he served customers in the cat cafe, he was unconsciously distracted by thoughts that had been troubling him for some time. The young man realized that in the recent days of living together with the werewolf, the latter had not once tried to kiss him or persuade him into tactile actions. The boy didn't understand the reason for the white cat's strange behavior, and therefore mistakenly thought it was his fault. Yeoul decided that the pet was deliberately distancing himself from him. Furthermore, during his reflections, the college student even believed that he had disappointed the werewolf or had become a bore to him. The abundance of thoughts hindered his work. The customers, who were obviously dissatisfied with the excessively slow service, noticed this. Therefore, the establishment's manager decided to expedite the situation by helping settle a customer's order and then expressing his anger to his nephew for not fulfilling his duties due to his own concerns. Therefore, the uncle asked the protagonist to focus on work, not unnecessary worries. In response, the boy asked for advice about what had been bothering him all this time. He inquired why a person might suddenly start reacting differently to another. The man didn't know exactly what was being referred to, but tried to think sensibly. He said that the reason could be resentment, disappointment, or the wrongdoing of the other person. Naturally, this only further troubled Yeoul, as it was exactly what he feared. As the college student fretted over what was happening between him and the werewolf, his uncle asked if his nephew was in a relationship with anyone, as such problems often arose in romantic couples. Of course, the young man hurriedly answered negatively, not wanting to give his relative a reason to continue developing this topic in their conversation. He was only concerned about Baeksu's changeable actions, and moreover, Yeoul was angry with him because of this, so he decided to resolve the misunderstanding as soon as he returned home from work. When the boy actually came home, he was very negatively disposed towards the white cat, obviously wanting to express all his thoughts to him. The transformed animal, on the contrary, warmly greeted the so-called master of the house, thereby causing him to feel awkward. Although the young man wanted to, he did not dare to tell the pet everything. He realized how shameful it would look from the outside. Therefore, instead of telling him about his own concerns and asking directly about the reason for the werewolf's aloofness, the protagonist yelled at him for watching TV again. Baeksu didn't understand this action at all, but no other explanations were provided. The college student, once again, immersed himself in his own thoughts about the situation that had been troubling him all this time. He was ashamed of what was happening, But he was also very embarrassed by the thought of asking directly. It seemed that Yeoul needed advice from an outsider, someone more experienced in such matters. Unexpectedly, the white cat himself interrupted the contemplation of the situation. He sat extremely close to the boy and inquired about the reasons for his strange behavior. The protagonist couldn't confess everything, so he tried to avoid discussing it. The werewolf didn't insist on it, but understood that something was bothering the young man. For this reason, he hugged him tightly, obviously wanting to support him. Yeoul mistakenly thought that he was finally being given the attention he had been deprived of, so he felt embarrassed. Then the transformed animal stated that he would never force the protagonist into affection and other actions if he did not consent, so he shouldn't worry about trivial matters. Moreover, he confessed that he liked touching the college student, but doing so against his will was wrong. It seemed that this was the main reason for the changes in the pet's behavior. This revelation astonished Yeoul so much that he blushed intensely. Also, the boy began to understand that to get what he wanted, he would have to ask the white cat aloud. Noticing such a peculiar reaction from the young man, Baeksu himself realized his desires and directly inquired about the accuracy of his guesses. Although the protagonist tried to deny it, it was futile. The werewolf asked him to speak aloud about his needs in the future. Obviously, the boy felt very uncomfortable, so he reacted overly emotionally to the information he heard and jumped out of bed. Nevertheless, he didn't want to end the conversation with the pet so abruptly, so he suggested they go for a walk outside together. He was confident that nothing bad would happen, as it was too dark late in the evening for anyone to notice the peculiarities in the appearance of the animal transformed into a human. The protagonist assisted his pet, who was in human form, in preparing for a walk. As it was already late in the evening, a cap and coat sufficed to conceal the white cat's lycanthropic nature. Upon stepping outside, the owner immediately felt the chill. Thus, Baeksu suggested they return. However, the protagonist refused, having insisted on the walk earlier. He felt awkward even at the slightest care from the man, but managed to restrain his emotions to avoid appearing strange. Soon, when the lycanthrope noticed the boy's flushed cheeks, he cupped his face in an attempt to warm his master, mistakenly believing the pinkness was due to cold, not embarrassment. This tender gesture from the pet evoked strong emotions in Yeoul, prompting him to hastily retreat and warm his face with his palms. Unexpectedly, a stray kitten approached the lycanthrope's owner. It was so adorable that the protagonist not only paid attention, but also desired to pet the fluffy friend. He did so, sharing his joy with the white cat. It seemed the tale-bearer disapproved, but he restrained his feelings. In the next moment, he requested his master not to touch the street animal. Yeoul mistakenly thought his pet was simply jealous of the other cat, so he continued petting it while attempting to dispute the request. However, the man's words were not driven by jealousy. He was more concerned about potential problems. During their conversation, the kitten's mother approached, clearly displeased with the situation. Initially, she showed hostility towards the white cat's owner, then quickly retrieved her child. Before leaving, she tried to claw the protagonist, but the lycanthrope protected him by taking the blow himself. Naturally, the man's hand was severely injured, causing the pet's owner to worry. Despite this, Baeksu assured that there was no need for concern, as he would be fine. In the next moment, he removed his cap and began communicating with the street cats in their language, astonishing the furry mother. It was revealed that the cat did not allow strangers to touch her child, especially in her territory. Although the white cat tried to explain that it was an accident, he was not listened to. Consequently, the tale-bearer had to apologize to the cat on behalf of his owner, taking the blame for his touch to the foreign offspring. Reluctantly, the mother accepted the apology and agreed to resolve everything peacefully. As a farewell, she asked the lycanthrope to advise the protagonist never to touch what is not his. The two young men watched the departing street animals for a long time. Only then did the boy turn his attention back to his pet's injured hand. Although he was concerned, Baeksu once again stated that he was fine. Now he confidently suggested they return home, as there had been more than enough excitement for one walk. On their way home, both men remained silent, with Yeoul continuing to ponder the foreign injury. Moreover, he was upset by the fact that the white cat was not jealous of him, as he still harbored romantic feelings for him. Despite this, he decided not to share his concerns, but to try to explain the situation with the kitten. The lycanthrope calmly explained that such an incident could happen to anyone, so there was no need to worry too much. This conversation reminded the protagonist of a moment from his school days when he also encountered a homeless kitten on the street. He shared with the white cat that he had tried to care for a fluffy friend in the past, but it soon vanished without a trace. The tale-bearer listened silently, seemingly lost in thought. At the same time, he took the boy's hand, as if wishing to support his owner. In that moment, Yeoul unexpectedly realized that the small kitten from his school days was none other than the lycanthrope himself. Previously, when the protagonist was in school, he was often so focused on his studies that he had no interest in anything else and befriended no one. This was not by his choice, but he could do nothing about it, so he silently observed as other upperclassmen interacted and consulted each other regarding exams. The boy always remained alone with his thoughts and worries. This exhausted him, but despite this, he continued to try. No matter how hard he tried in the past, he could not establish close communication with his classmates. Before he could befriend anyone, people left or were replaced by others. For this reason, the boy was constantly saddened as he truly needed companionship and support. One day, returning from lessons, Yeoul heard a strange rustling in the bushes. Turning around, he hurried to approach them to understand the source of the noise. There, he found a small white kitten sitting all alone. Naturally, the protagonist did not expect to encounter a stray animal on school grounds, so he was taken aback. Moreover, he understood that the fluffy friend was too small to be alone. Despite his nervousness, the future pet owner decided to give it attention and tried to pet it. Unexpectedly, little Baeksu began to approach him on his own to receive affection from a human. The white kitten placed its front paws on the protagonist, greatly astonishing him. Moreover, it emitted a very pitiful sound, compelling him to wish to take the tale-bearer home. That's why, when the boy returned to his dwelling, he first asked his father to adopt the kitten. Although Yeoul was very nervous before the conversation and even prepared thoroughly for it, the man responded sternly and gently. He refused his son's request, calling it reckless. The parent believed that his son needed to think exclusively about his studies and the upcoming graduation exams, so there was no place for a kitten in their home. Naturally, the refusal greatly upset the boy, even causing him to yell at his relative. Now, returning home from the walk, the owner of the white cat hurried to the shower, obviously feeling awkward about his past memories. Only when alone did he reflect on the fact that the kitten from his school days was indeed his current pet. The thoughts surprised the boy, as he had longed for and searched for the fluffy friend in the schoolyard as soon as it suddenly disappeared. Nonetheless, he could not find the tale-bearer. The protagonist blamed himself for not having the opportunity to take Baeksu home during that period, so he wanted to apologize to him in the past. Now, realizing that they had managed to meet again, Yeoul was very embarrassed. Meanwhile, the lycanthrope waited for his master to come out of the shower at the door. After pondering the conversation that occurred during the walk, he realized that the boy indeed remembered him. Of course, this made him much happier, as the white cat had loved the protagonist since their first meeting in the schoolyard. Now he understood that his romantic feelings for his owner had grown much stronger than before. Although the tale-bearer was pleased, he knew not to get his hopes up prematurely. The man was frankly afraid of being disappointed in his love, yet he was also extremely happy about the news he learned. A little later, when the protagonist came out of the shower, he found his pet sleeping on the sofa. Observing the other's face in such a vulnerable state, Yeoul reflected on his own. He considered the white cat very cute and hoped that it was having beautiful dreams. Unexpectedly, when the boy expressed his wishes, the tale-bearer opened his eyes and looked at the object of his love. In the next moment, he took his owner's hand and laid it on his chest, as if trying to demonstrate his feelings in this way. Right after, Baeksu confessed to the boy that he was insanely happy to see him. Just by his smile, one could understand that the pet was not lying. The lycanthrope's behavior greatly surprised, but even more embarrassed the protagonist. For this reason, he became confused not only in his actions, but also in the feelings he experienced towards his pet. The following day, as Yeoul found himself in the bathroom once again, he devised what seemed to him a brilliant plan to attract the white cat's attention to himself. Thus, in a moment, he began to execute it. For this, the boy peeked out of the room and summoned the tale-bearer to him. Standing before him in nothing but a shirt on his bare body, the protagonist feigned innocence and asked the white cat to bring him his pants. The pet's owner explained that he had supposedly forgotten them when going to the bathroom, and now he felt too awkward to step out without them. Surprisingly, Baeksu believed such an absurd lie and calmly agreed to fulfill the request. In an instant, he brought his owner a clean pair of pants and handed them over as if he hadn't noticed the latter's attempts to draw attention to himself and his body. Yeoul did not like the lycanthrope's indifferent behavior, but nonetheless he accepted the help, as he simply could not express anything. A little later, as the two young men spent time together, the pet's owner was reading a book while the latter was once again watching television. The white cat lay on the boy's lap, so he felt extremely embarrassed and scrutinized the transformed animal that was too close. For this reason, he could not focus on what he read at all. Baeksu noticed the owner's atypical behavior and asked how interesting he found the book. Although Yeoul spoke of the benefits of regular reading and his love for the process, he was exclusively thinking about his interlocutor and his charming appearance. Unexpectedly, in such a personal moment between the two young men, the protagonist wanted to kiss the lycanthrope himself. He did not succeed, as the latter, as if deliberately, got distracted by the television and ruined the opportunity for close contact. Naturally, this upset the boy, so he decided to go to the store for some drinks to spend a little time alone. Soon, he pondered why such things happened. The owner of the white cat disliked the lack of initiative from the pet, but most of all, he could not bear the fact that his efforts were also hindered. Choosing beer, the boy recalled the first days of living with the transformed man and compared them to what he has now. Of course, there was a significant difference. Although he was angry at the lycanthrope because of this, passing by a display with various protective options, he could not ignore the desire to buy one of them. For this reason, the boy picked up a package and confidently headed to the cashier. It seems that he still hoped to achieve contact with Baeksu soon. On the way back, when the protagonist was already near the entrance to his dwelling, he stopped in front of the door to reconsider the situation and his actions. Looking at the package with protective means, he remembered that he had always dreamed of trusting romantic relationships that would not be based solely on contact between two men. Now, he inadvertently had the opposite of his desires, but it seems that it did not bother him at all. Therefore, hiding the package in his jacket pocket, the owner of the white cat entered the apartment. Surprisingly, the pet did not greet him personally, as he was in the bathroom. In a moment, as soon as Yeoul called him, the tale-bearer emerged half-naked from the room and greeted the owner. The man's revealing appearance greatly embarrassed the protagonist, so he hesitated for a moment. As soon as Baeksu showed his cat-like habits, which could seem extremely seductive, his owner blushed even more in front of him. Nonetheless, the white cat pretended as if he noticed nothing strange and just helped unpack the groceries from the store. Yeoul, however, could not take his eyes off the lycanthrope's body, so he scrutinized every detail of it. At that moment, the boy realized that he could not bear the aloofness from the transformed animal any longer, so he honestly declared his desire for close contact with him. At his own boldness, the owner of the white cat felt even more awkward, so when the latter asked him to repeat what he had heard, he tried to pretend as if nothing had happened. Of course, it did not work, as Baeksu knew that he had understood everything correctly. For this reason, he offered the protagonist to touch his body personally as before. When Yeoul did so, he obviously liked it, so in the next moment, the man asked for permission to touch the other's body as well. Although the boy was very embarrassed by what was happening, he could not object. Therefore, the lycanthrope kissed him, forcing him to unexpectedly reciprocate. The personal interaction between the two young men gradually prolonged and evolved into something more than a mere kiss. Despite the white cat's apparent assertiveness in the process, the protagonist obviously enjoyed it very much. For this reason, his legs soon gave way, unable to withstand the overflow of feelings and emotions in the moment. As a result, Yeoul unexpectedly collapsed to the floor, causing the transformed animal to momentarily doubt his actions and be very surprised. Nonetheless, the lycanthrope knew what to do even in such an awkward situation. Seemingly relying on his instincts, he picked up his owner and carried him to bed. Only there, having laid the boy on the pillows, did he inquire about his well-being. Receiving a positive response that the owner was fine, the man decided to continue. In the secluded moment between the two young men, the protagonist unexpectedly noted the fact that his pet was very gentle and attentive to him. It was evident that he liked this detail, as it made him ponder something greater. Gradually, as the personal process between the men continued, Yeoul began to trust his partner more, who was very considerate and gentle with him. At first, most of the lycanthrope's actions resembled those in the early days of their life together, but a little later, the white cat decided to finish what was started and proceed to the main process with his owner. This time, the protagonist was not opposed to it. On the contrary, he had long envisioned that this would happen between them. In the early morning, when the protagonist awoke, he was very embarrassed about what had transpired the previous night. Due to detailed reflections on this, the boy unexpectedly realized that he was beginning to feel moral attachment and affection towards the white cat. Such thoughts forced him to look at the sleeping lycanthrope beside him and also note to himself that he was very cute even in his sleep. Suddenly, Yeoul realized that in such a relaxed moment, he continued to think about something more explicit. Of course, he felt awkwardness and shame at the thoughts of this, so he tried to convince himself to stop. Eventually, the boy's reflections on what had happened were replaced by a more important topic of how the relationship between him and the lycanthrope was developing too quickly. Despite the strangeness of this, the boy calmly accepted the details, obviously resigning himself to the fact that nothing would happen as he had dreamed before. Meanwhile, Baeksu woke up and affectionately greeted his owner, also asking if he had slept well. Naturally, after what they had experienced the previous night, the answer could only be negative. Nevertheless, even that pleased the white cat after the close contact they had shared. Therefore, embracing the boy, he suggested they sleep a little more together. The protagonist, however, was amazed that the transformed animal was so calm about what was happening, as he himself felt awkward. In the next moment, Yeoul noticed that he was about to be late for work, so getting out of bed, he hurriedly began to get ready. When the boy was in the shower, his pet came to him, obviously wanting to shower together. As soon as the two young men found themselves in a closed space, the white cat managed to examine the marks on his partner's body that he had left the previous night. Without much thought, the lycanthrope pointed out this detail to his owner, causing him to be quite embarrassed. When Yeoul began discussing what had happened with the man, he unexpectedly noticed the latter's excessive desire to spend time together again. Although he tried to refuse the white cat's request for close contact between them, arguing that he would be late for work, Baeksu was resolutely determined to carry out his plan. That's why he continued his explicit actions towards his owner, despite his excuses and obvious protest. In the end, the transformed animal achieved his goal, and even the protagonist was extremely satisfied with what had happened. Finishing with the shower, the boy kissed the white cat on the cheek and went on to get ready for work. Such a sweet gesture from the owner greatly pleased the pet, so he could not contain his own emotions. As the protagonist was preparing to go to his uncle's cat cafe, he was still being held back by the lycanthrope, who was desperately eager to spend more time together. Since the boy could not afford to be even more delayed than before, he refused the white cat, offering another gentle kiss on the cheek in return. The care shown by the owner greatly pleased the transformed animal, and with a smile Baeksu responded with his own tender action, which greatly embarrassed his partner. Soon, the protagonist had to desperately run to work, hoping he wouldn't be fired this time, as the man had delayed him for a very long time, thereby only worsening the situation. When Yeoul arrived at the establishment, the first thing he saw was his relative feeding stray animals. Naturally, this surprised him, as his uncle already had enough other concerns in the cat cafe. Nonetheless, he looked happy helping the stray furry friends. Calling out to the man, the boy decided to inquire about what was happening. His uncle told him that an unfamiliar family of pets had come to him for the first time, so he simply could not refuse to feed them. Only by taking a closer look at the animals that had come did the protagonist immediately recognize in them the mother cat and the little kitten from the late-night walk earlier. It seems that they too instantly remembered him, particularly the mother, whom Yeoul had managed to anger in the past. As soon as the relative noticed the stray cat's vivid reaction to meeting his nephew, he asked about it. The protagonist was forced to lie about how his first encounter with the animals occurred. Soon, the man left the boy's company, leaving him to scold the furry friends alone. Although he did nothing bad anymore, the cat still could not forgive him for the previous situation, so she tried to drive Yeoul away in her own language. She was unsuccessful, as the protagonist did not understand the language of animals. This forced the mother to hastily leave the company of the unpleasant person for her. She forcibly took her child away from the boy, not even letting it finish its treat. The sudden change in behavior and the hasty escape of the stray cats surprised Yeoul, but he could not stop it, only watching until the pets disappeared from sight. For some more time, the protagonist pondered the unpleasant situation that had occurred with the stray animals. As soon as he entered the establishment, his uncle showed him a special cream cake. The man was deliberately preparing it in honor of the upcoming Christmas celebration. In this way, he obviously wanted to increase the popularity of his establishment. Moreover, since the protagonist's relative owned a cat cafe, he also wanted to make a treat for the cats. Naturally, such a plan amazed the boy, but he was not against supporting his uncle in this. In the moment of talking about the amazing cake, Yeoul suddenly thought that he could try to please the white cat with something similar in honor of the holiday. He wanted to please the transformed animal, with whom he was now in a partnership. Soon, the thoughts of the establishment's worker were disturbed by a visitor. A regular customer came for her usual order, but noticing the cake, she became interested in it. In the next moment, the woman announced that she wanted to order a special dessert for her pets. This news surprised the protagonist and greatly pleased the owner of the cat cafe. For this reason, the man asked his nephew to serve the customer and help discuss all the details regarding the upcoming Christmas cake order. Mentally, Yeoul realized that he would be giving gifts for the first time on such a holiday to someone other than family members. Meanwhile, the white cat was watching television as usual, which also increasingly talked about the upcoming New Year's celebration. Naturally, the lycanthrope could not know the details of what was happening, as he had lived his whole life on the street in the guise of a furry friend, but what he heard greatly interested him. As soon as the man noticed an advertisement stating that one should give gifts to loved ones on a special day, he became even more intrigued by what was happening. It seems that Baeksu too began to look forward to Christmas with anticipation. Returning late in the evening from work, the protagonist continued to think about what to give the transformed animal for the holiday. It seems he wanted to purchase something special. For this reason, he tried to understand what the white cat liked the most. Unfortunately, the boy remembered that the cat only loved him. Nevertheless, Yeoul did not have a clear answer to the question of what to give his pet. The excessive difficulty in choosing the upcoming gift forced the lycanthrope's owner to even consider asking him directly. As soon as the protagonist returned home, he was joyfully greeted by the white cat, who obviously missed him dearly during their separation. The man hugged and then kissed his beloved owner on the cheek. His actions embarrassed the boy, but also continued to please him. Noticing the excessive enthusiasm from the transformed animal, the owner inquired about the reasons and unexpectedly learned about the upcoming holiday. Naturally, Yeoul was surprised by the white cat's knowledge of Christmas, but it was entirely explainable by the presence of a television in the house. In a moment after the conversation, the lycanthrope grabbed his owner and dragged him to bed first. Such explicit actions by Baeksu astonished and greatly embarrassed the protagonist, so he hurried to stop the pet and inquire about what was happening. Then the man confidently declared that he was trying to follow the advice given by a TV show earlier. He wanted to express his love for the boy in honor of the upcoming holidays. The owner of the white cat was shocked by what he heard, so he immediately began to protest and shout. He explained that the expression obviously referred to romantic feelings, not to engaging in close contact. Therefore, such so-called love should be expressed entirely differently. Moreover, the boy also informed that Christmas had not yet arrived. Despite the information heard, it seemed that Baeksu did not understand anything at all. As it turned out, he was less interested in the holiday than in the desire to engage in something personal with Yeoul. Learning this from the pet, the boy, for the first time, did not get angry at him, but became embarrassed and decided to act independently, obviously agreeing to fulfill the man's desire. For this reason, in a moment, he again took out the package with the protective means he had bought earlier. This time, he wanted to use it. The protagonist asked the white cat to put on the contents of the box before they started the main actions. Although the transformed animal was not against it, he did not know how to use the items handed to him. Without much thought, he asked for help from the owner. Yeoul was very embarrassed by the request heard, but understood that he simply had to help if he wanted to use what he had bought. For this reason, he did not refuse the lycanthrope, but instead agreed and began the process independently. Before using the protective means, he decided to satisfy the white cat by showing initiative towards him. Such a tender gesture from the owner was very pleasing to the pet, so he enjoyed the moment together with him. When the two young men finally managed to cope with the previously purchased items, they continued the close contact in its full measure. Soon, when the protagonist once again went to work, the white cat rushed to the laptop to learn more details about the upcoming holiday. Managing to type in the name with difficulty, the transformed animal immersed itself in studying information about it. It seems that what he read managed to please him. Meanwhile, at work, the boy fully endeavored to help his uncle decorate the cat cafe with thematic ornaments, a Christmas tree, and other items that symbolized Christmas. He tried very hard, so the space became more atmospheric and charming. Yeoul was so engrossed in this that he feared overdoing it with a number of decorations. It seems that the reason for his inspired work was a personal desire to celebrate the upcoming holiday well with a partner who interested him. Nevertheless, the relative, who could not know the details of his nephew's life, could only praise his diligence. Since the event was to take place very soon, the protagonist thought that they had started decorating the establishment too late. The uncle agreed with this, but could not completely forego the atmosphere. Although the worker understood the boss's feelings, he explained that it was extremely wasteful to buy decorations for Christmas just a couple of days before it, as it would be sad to throw them away afterward. The relative assured that they could be kept until the new year, thereby extending their lifespan. It seems that he had thought everything through. During the conversation, Yeoul asked his uncle for permission to leave work early that day. He explained that he needed to buy something important. Naturally, the man immediately guessed that his nephew was going to choose a gift for someone. Therefore, he even mistakenly decided that it was for him personally. Nevertheless, the boy ignored most of the clarifying questions from his relative, obviously due to embarrassment, and having received permission to leave, he thanked him for it. Although the uncle pretended not to understand the details of the worker's life, mentally he admitted to himself that he knew about his nephew's relationship. Freed from work, the protagonist set out in search of a suitable gift for his pet. He wandered around the shopping center for a long time before he could find an item that would really interest him. The owner of the white cat found a beautiful bracelet that not only appealed to him, but also, as it seemed, would be perfect for the transformed animal. However, before buying such a thing, Yeoul pondered whether such a present would seem strange, as it was obvious that jewelry is rarely given for Christmas. Despite this, no matter how much the pet's owner thought, he could not come up with another, more suitable option. That's why, giving in, he went to the store for the bracelet he liked for Baeksu. Only after buying it did the boy manage to calm his own anxiety and feel the joy of the upcoming holiday. It seems that he really wanted to please his partner. Unconsciously, he fantasized about this moment as soon as he bought the bracelet. Naturally, his dreams in this moment ended with something more romantic than is usually expected from Christmas. Late in the evening, returning home, Yeoul thought only about how the white cat would react to his present. He sincerely wanted to believe that Baeksu would be happy. As the date of the upcoming holiday approached, the cat cafe saw an increasing number of visitors, as many wished to obtain a special cake for their pets. Before heading home after a strenuous workday, the protagonist's relative called out to him. He handed him a special dessert in honor of the holiday, explaining that it was his way of celebrating with him. The boy felt awkward at such a thoughtful gesture from his boss, as he himself had not prepared anything as a present for him. Nonetheless, the man asked him to accept the cake and also informed him that he had never expected to receive a gift from his nephew for Christmas. Despite the obvious awkwardness of the situation, Yeoul hurried to thank his relative for the received dessert. This alone was enough to please the uncle. On his way home, the owner of the white cat was more anxious than usual, as this evening was special for him and his partner. They were celebrating Christmas together for the first time. Before approaching the house, the boy decided to hide the gift in his pocket to prevent any awkward accidents upon meeting the lycanthrope. Unexpectedly, Baeksu himself called out to the protagonist near the building. It was the first time he was outside in human form alone, which greatly surprised the owner. Yeoul quickly approached him and asked about the reasons for venturing into the outside world without him. The boy never received an answer, as the pet became interested in the box with the cake received from the uncle earlier. As soon as the owner of the white cat explained that it contained a gift, the transformed animal began to shake it from side to side, unwittingly damaging it. Eventually, this led to the two young men ending up with a collapsed cake for Christmas at home. However, although it did not look very presentable, it was still expected to be very tasty. That's why the boy suggested they taste it together. When the lycanthrope helped set the table for the upcoming meal, Yeoul handed him the box with the gift he had personally chosen. The white cat was astonished, as he had not expected to receive a present from his beloved person. Nevertheless, he was happy to accept it. In a moment, the pet became dejected, even without opening the box. He explained that he had not managed to prepare a gift for the protagonist, despite trying hard. Earlier, Baeksu had found a suitable present for the owner online, but he could not pay for it using a card. Despite this, Yeoul was happy, as even though he received nothing, he was thought of and sincerely wanted to be pleased. For this reason, he tried to soothe the lycanthrope's sadness by suggesting they eat the cake together. Then, Baeksu took a bit of cream with his finger and, after tasting it, honestly remarked that it was delicious. In the next moment, he did the same to offer a taste to the owner. The protagonist, with evident embarrassment, tasted the dessert from the hands of the white cat. Unexpectedly, the latter intentionally smeared his face to eat a bit of the cake with a kiss.
For a while, the two young people relished their time together, sharing a Christmas cake. This continued until a piece of the treat fell. It landed directly on the protagonist's trousers, surprising both of them. As the boy pondered what to do next, the white-haired one decided to remove the sweet dessert with his mouth. Such actions deeply embarrassed the blonde, prompting him to stop his lover. Thus, Yeoul pushed the white cat away. He felt it was improper to continue and decided to simply discard the soiled trousers. Baeksu, not wanting to waste time, began to help him with his plan. This ambiguous care made the boy even more flustered, knowing well where this could lead. Eventually, it happened as expected, and the two young people decided to engage in an intimate moment right then. The next morning, the white-tailed owner was occupied with something unusual. Soon after, the boy woke up feeling extremely tired from the recent events. When he opened his eyes, he saw the transformed animal busy with something important at a nearby desk. Naturally, this made him try to ask directly about what was happening. The cheerful white cat turned to his owner and showed a bracelet he had received as a gift from him not long ago. It seemed the shapeshifter was immensely happy with the present, boasting about it to Yeoul. Clearly, the pet was very impressed by his first ever gift, especially from his beloved person. That's why he put it on immediately. The white-haired one's behavior surprised the boy, as he hadn't expected the chosen accessory to impress his partner so much. Nevertheless, when the owner of the white tail stood up, he discovered what the cat had been doing all this time. The protagonist found a similar bracelet on his arm, but this one was drawn on paper and cut out. It turned out that the white-haired one had made it himself as a gift for his partner, wanting to delight him with something special for Christmas. The shapeshifter admitted that he had worked hard to draw a similar bracelet, wanting not only to repay his gift, but also to make a reciprocal one. Such behavior amazed Yeoul, but even more so when the white cat thanked him for everything that had happened between them since their first meeting. Taking the protagonist's hand, the tailed one expressed his hope to stay with him forever. Every gesture from Baeksu now flustered the blonde even more, as he hadn't expected such gratitude. Blushing deeply, the white cat's owner mentally confessed that he found the white-haired one incredibly cute. It was clear that he was moved by what had happened. This occurrence made him reflect on the past and his life in general. Previously, the boy had believed he could never love another person, as everyone he knew was too different and never understood him personally. Now, thanks to his acquaintance with the transformed animal, the protagonist realized that he could feel genuine emotions towards him. This was because Baeksu had always been honest with his owner and understood him perfectly, loving him truly. For this reason, looking at his beloved white-tailed one, Yeoul realized he had finally found his true match in this world. Without much thought, he smiled at the white cat and then honestly confessed that he was his best gift this Christmas. Even after some time had passed, the white-tailed one never ceased to delight in the gift he had received earlier, constantly admiring it, even when it was in its box rather than on his wrist. The protagonist continued to marvel at this, as the pet refused to eat with him due to his excessive attention to the accessory. It seemed that the transformed animal had now found a new favorite item in the apartment, aside from the television he had cherished earlier. When the joint breakfast of the two young people came to an end, Baeksu washed the dishes. It appeared he had already grown accustomed to his household duties during his stay at the boy's home. Meanwhile, the protagonist was slowly getting ready for work. Soon, he informed the white-haired one that he had to leave him for a while. The latter, in turn, bid Yeoul farewell with sincere concern for his dear one. Such genuine kindness from the transformed animal made his owner blush. Clearly, his romantic feelings for him were quite strong, for in the next moment, the blonde tightly embraced the white cat, inwardly confessing to himself that he did not want to go to work. Nevertheless, he reluctantly released the shapeshifter, and after patting him on the head, planned to leave his home. Then, the tailed one suddenly decided to show even more affection and attention to his beloved partner by kissing his hand. Thus, the desire of the cat cafe worker to leave his apartment, and particularly his lover, diminished even further. Once outside, the protagonist paused for a moment, as the flood of thoughts about the white-tailed one's excellence hindered him from moving forward. It was evident that Yeoul was reflecting on the moment that had just transpired between him and his pet. Blushing, he mused that his sole wish was to return home and be alone with his beloved. Nevertheless, he soon managed to focus on the important matter and finally set off for work. On his way to his uncle's cat cafe, the boy noticed a stray black cat nearby. The stray animal was extremely dirty, evidently from a long walk through the city's streets. This random encounter greatly surprised the blonde, as he was not used to meeting tailed creatures so unexpectedly. Since the black cat behaved rather calmly and quite strangely, the cat cafe worker unconsciously assumed that it might be like his partner. For this reason, the protagonist suddenly wanted to take care of the black-tailed one, but he was unsure if it would agree to go with him. Surprisingly, the street animal, sensing a familiar scent emanating directly from Yeoul, decided to follow him on its own. The boy was immensely pleased by this, and thus suggested to the pet that they go to his relative's establishment, where stray cats were usually fed. Upon reaching the designated place, the cat cafe worker went inside to fetch food for the black-tailed one. When he returned, the stray animal had already left. Despite his earlier request for it to wait, it clearly did not understand. Unfortunately, he was unable to find it. Consequently, the establishment's employee returned to the entrance, where he spotted a stray mother cat and her kitten. Unexpectedly, the blonde tried to ask them if they had seen the black cat. Of course, they could not answer him. The incident with the street animal deeply saddened Yeoul, as certain similarities made him recall the moment he found his beloved earlier. As a result, the protagonist began to miss him dearly. Without much thought, he decided to leave some food for the missing one near the entrance to his relative's establishment. It seemed the boy hoped the black cat would return someday. Meanwhile, the black-tailed one, with a suspicious cunning, observed everything from a distance. It seemed he had devised a plan. As the mother cat and her kitten strolled down the street near the cat cafe, they were stopped by a black cat who wanted to ask an important question. The mother was startled by the unexpected encounter with the stranger, having never seen him in the neighborhood before, and felt a sense of suspicion. The black-tailed one confessed that he had been searching for his acquaintance for a long time and had unintentionally gotten lost. Feeling deeply sorry for the stray, the mother cat agreed to help him and answer his question. He wanted to know who lived in the protagonist's uncle's establishment. The mother truthfully confessed that the owner of the cat cafe resided there, and he often fed the stray cats. This information delighted the black-tailed one, as it seemed his search had finally come to an end. The stranger's reaction astonished the local resident, prompting her to be slightly cautious. Nevertheless, she decided to warn the black cat about a certain danger she had noticed recently. It was evident that the mother cat was trying to tell him about Baeksu, who could transform into a human, but no one listened to her. Instead, the black-tailed one asked for her help in executing a cunning plan. A little later, the mother cat arrived at the cafe with her kitten, persistently calling Yeoul for help from the doorstep. The strange occurrence astonished the boy, and even his uncle suddenly came out at the unusual call, hoping to understand the situation. After discussing the details briefly, the two young men concluded that they needed to approach the mother cat and her kitten to find out what had happened. As soon as the owner of the white-haired one stepped outside to meet them, the persistent mother began to lead him in another direction, as if she had something crucial to convey. Once the blonde realized this, he immediately followed the small feline family, continually asking them where and why they were leading him. It seemed the cat cafe worker hoped the street animals would answer him. Soon, the mother cat led the establishment's employee to a seemingly unconscious black cat, clearly distressed, pleading for help with her meows. As soon as the protagonist noticed the black-tailed one, he was greatly surprised, immediately recalling their recent encounter on another street in the area. Naturally, he wanted to know what had happened to the unfortunate black cat, but no one could provide an answer. For this reason, Yeoul decided to quickly take the stray animal to his uncle's establishment, believing only there could it receive proper help. In truth, the black-tailed one was merely pretending to be injured and ill to gain entry into the cat cafe and execute further details of his cunning plan. Soon, the boy hurried into his relative's establishment, explained the situation, and handed over the supposedly injured stray. After a brief examination, the blonde's uncle reported that there were no external injuries on the black-tailed one, leaving the cause of his condition unclear. Nonetheless, the relative did not rule out possible internal issues and suggested taking him to a veterinary clinic immediately. Upon hearing that he was to be taken away from the cat cafe, the street animal quickly sprang to his feet, pretending to be fine. This action clearly showed the two young men that the black-tailed one was perfectly healthy. Surprisingly, they were not at all angry with him for this trick. On the contrary, noticing that the stray was hungry, they decided to feed him quickly. The relatives were very kind to the black-tailed one. Given a full bowl of delicious food, the black cat hesitated for a while before eating. It seemed he couldn't believe that everything in the bowl was meant just for him. However, once he began eating, he was ecstatic with the pleasure, having never tasted anything better in his life. The protagonist was immensely happy that the stray was indeed all right. After ensuring he was helped, he prepared to go home and informed his uncle. Moments later, after receiving his relative's approval, Yeoul hurriedly left the cat cafe. Before departing, he, of course, bid farewell to the black cat. The event astonished the stray, who had mistakenly believed that the boy lived at his relative's establishment. Now, understanding this was not the case, he was deeply irritated. Late in the evening, as Baeksu's owner walked home, he encountered him on the way. Clearly, the white-haired one had come out to meet his partner. This sweet gesture from his beloved delighted the blonde immensely, prompting him to hurry home with him. Unexpectedly, the transformed animal, unashamed that they were in public, decided to kiss the cat cafe worker on the lips. This behavior from the white cat deeply embarrassed and simultaneously alarmed the protagonist, causing him to immediately stop him and then scold him for such mischief. Though Yeoul did so more playfully than seriously, the shapeshifter took it tragically and became upset by the repeated rejection. Only then was the boy compelled to admit that he was simply very flustered by such actions from his beloved tailed one. Hugging the white-tailed one tightly, his owner suggested continuing such actions at home and from then on starting them only there. As it turned out, the black cat had been watching the two young men. Upon returning home, the protagonist pondered for a long time about what he should do first. Since it was quite cold outside, he planned to take a hot bath and have a meal after a hard day's work. To decide what to do first, Yeoul sought the opinion of the white-haired one. Although Baeksu was surprised by the question, it seemed he had a different answer in mind, for in the next moment, he tightly embraced the boy from behind and sniffed him. It was evident that the transformed animal acted this way because he had missed his owner for a long time, but unexpectedly, he caught the scent of a street pet emanating directly from the cat cafe worker. The white cat then honestly tried to inquire about this from the protagonist. After a brief contemplation, he recalled the incident with the stray animal and thoroughly explained the act of helping it to the shapeshifter. Upon learning some details, the tailed one realized he had encountered this scent somewhere before. Naturally, this seemed very strange to him. To verify his suspicions, the white-tailed one decided to sniff Yeoul more thoroughly. This behavior greatly embarrassed the boy, who did not expect such tactile closeness because of the street cat. Naturally, Baeksu's owner unconsciously thought about intimate processes with him. As if desiring the same, the white-haired one suddenly took the initiative. This behavior from the transformed animal was unexpected for the blonde, but nonetheless, he liked it very much. Soon, the two young people decided to engage in intimate contact with each other. Late at night, the black cat sat outside the cat cafe door, meowing loudly, clearly demanding to be let inside to spend the night. The street animal's loud behavior managed to wake the protagonist's uncle and even forced him to go downstairs to open the door. Although the man tried to find out why the tailed one had decided to return, the cat, ignoring everyone, abruptly ran inside. This behavior from the stray animal completely shocked Yeoul's relative, but he did not chase it away. On the contrary, after scolding it slightly for its antics, the boy's uncle allowed it to stay overnight in his establishment. The reason for his decision was the snowfall outside. Being a kind-hearted person, the cat cafe owner couldn't send the black-tailed one back into such dreadful weather. Moreover, the man took care of the black cat and even provided it with a blanket to keep warm on the cold winter night. As he fell asleep, the stray animal thought only that the scent on the protagonist's body was very similar to that of his acquaintance, and thus, to find him, he needed to continue following Yeoul. The next morning, when the protagonist arrived at his uncle's cat cafe for work, he was astonished to see the very same black cat inside. Naturally, the first thing the boy decided to do was to ask his relative about the events of the previous night, as he was surprised that the stray animal had spent the night indoors. The man candidly recounted everything that had happened earlier, including his decision to let the tailed one stay due to the heavy snowfall. Yeoul understood, as he had once taken in the white-haired one in a similar manner. For this reason, Baeksu's owner tried to find out from his relative whether the unfortunate animal would stay with them permanently. It seemed the man did not favor this outcome, but couldn't be certain. Worried by his nephew's opinion, the cat cafe owner loaded him with work and hurriedly left, claiming to be very busy. The sudden change in mood and strange behavior of the establishment's owner surprised the boy, but he did not argue and simply went to work. Soon, the blonde asked the black cat about his thoughts on living in the cat cafe. He obviously hoped for a response, but, of course, none came. In the end, the protagonist wished him luck and continued his work. Meanwhile, the tailed one mentally admitted that his goal was to follow only one person, and it wasn't the man. Throughout Yeoul's entire shift, the black cat secretly followed and watched him. Several times, the boy caught him but couldn't stop him. This continued until late evening, making Baeksu's owner feel extremely strange and uncomfortable. Even when work ended and the blonde went home, he felt as if someone's eyes were following him, causing him great anxiety. Periodically, the protagonist would sharply turn around, trying to catch the street animal that had been shadowing him all day. But it was nowhere to be seen, as if it were a figment of the cat cafe worker's imagination. In reality, everything was happening for real. The black-tailed one was skillfully hiding this time, not wanting to be caught again. This continued until Yeoul's apartment. Once there, the boy waited for Baeksu to open the door and greet him cheerfully. Previously, the owner of the white-haired one would always open the door himself, but this time he wanted the transformed animal to let him in. As soon as it happened, the blonde tightly embraced the white cat and quietly confessed how exhausted he was from the day. Naturally, the other responded with mutual actions and mentioned how much he had missed him while alone. When the two young men entered and planned to close the door, the black cat suddenly leapt at the cat cafe worker and began scratching his face. The incident shocked both of them, and soon the shapeshifter grabbed the street animal by the back to detach it from the protagonist. Once Yeoul was no longer in danger, they decided to calmly resolve the situation. Unexpectedly, the black-tailed one started shouting in the cat language, demanding Baeksu let him go because he was searching for his close friend named Ray. Hearing this from the street animal shocked the white-haired one, as he could understand the cat language even in his human form. Moreover, it seemed the transformed animal recognized the black cat as his friend, so he tried to inquire further. Upon noticing the cat-like features and speech from the shapeshifter, the black-tailed one tried to comprehend the situation in horror. It seemed the street animal was greatly frightened by the unfamiliar creature and began to cautiously ask for details. Only then did Baeksu attempt to calm the black cat by allowing him to sniff him. As soon as he did, he immediately recognized the white-haired one as his best friend, Ray. Overjoyed to have finally ended his search, the tailed one immediately rushed into the arms of his longtime friend. The protagonist, observing everything from the side, was extremely surprised, as he didn't understand the cat language and thus didn't know what had happened. Nevertheless, he decided to ask his beloved partner for all the details. A little later, Baeksu helped the protagonist treat the wounds inflicted by the black cat. During this time, the boys conversed, and the boy learned the true story of what had happened. It turned out that the white-haired one and the stray animal had lived in the same neighborhood in the past, and when the latter injured his paw, the former helped him, thus beginning their friendship. In fact, it was Yeoul who had treated the unfortunate one at that time, but the tailed one didn't consider it that way, as he greatly valued his moral bond with Ray. After hearing the entire story from the black-tailed one, the shapeshifter's owner was deeply moved, knowing that he had bravely traversed a great distance to reunite with his best friend. Once everything was clear, the friend from the white-haired one's past tried to learn how he had suddenly become human. It seemed that even the white cat didn't know the exact answer to this question, leaving him visibly puzzled. Nevertheless, they both knew that the shapeshifter had long dreamed of transforming. During their conversation about this, the black cat confessed that he had missed and worried about his friend greatly, and didn't want him to disappear from his life again. The white-tailed one seemed to understand his best friend's concern and agreed to fulfill his request. While the old friends conversed in their language, the protagonist had no choice but to watch in mild bewilderment and remain silent. Yeoul felt very strange about what he saw, as it was the first time he felt like an outsider in his beloved shapeshifter's company. For this reason, the shapeshifter's owner decided to leave the two friends alone and went to get a blanket for the guest. As the blonde busied himself with this, he noticed how well the two pets got along. Reflecting on this, he felt terribly sad and abandoned. It seemed the cat cafe worker was jealous of the white cat's best friend because he wanted to be the closest creature in his company. Nevertheless, the protagonist decided not to ruin Baeksu's reunion with the black cat and resolved to keep his negative feelings to himself. Late at night, when everyone had gone to bed, the two young men lay in one bed while their guest rested on the living room couch. At this moment, Yeoul talked with the shapeshifter about the day's events and asked why he chose to sleep with him instead of the tailed one. He was sure the two pets had much to discuss after all this time. Although this was true, the white cat didn't want to leave his beloved alone for the night. As soon as he confessed this to the boy, he tightly embraced the shapeshifter. He felt a deep love for him and didn't want to be jealous anymore. Only now, as the two young men expressed obvious romantic feelings through their touches, did the tailed one's owner realize that his friend's situation would be difficult, as they were now a couple. Suddenly, while the blonde pondered this, Baeksu began to seduce his beloved, urging him to engage in intimacy despite the guest in the next room. Naturally, the cat cafe worker didn't like this, but he couldn't resist his partner for long. Soon, the loving couple began the desired process together. Meanwhile, the black cat awoke due to a physiological need and, noticing that his best friend was not nearby, went to look for him. Unexpectedly, the street animal stumbled upon the intimate process of the two young men, greatly surprising them and forcing them to stop. In the past, when Baeksu still lived on the streets in the guise of a white cat, he was contemplating something important one evening. At that moment, his best friend came to talk to him. He tried to ask the white-haired one why he was so sad. As revealed through their subsequent conversation, the white cat had already dreamt of meeting the protagonist. He honestly confessed this to the black-tailed one and explained that his separation from this person had lasted far too long. It was his tailed friend who encouraged the transformed animal to go in search of Yeoul. More precisely, he even promised to help with this. After all, more than anything in the world, the black cat wanted his best friend not to be sad. He was sincere towards Baeksu because he valued him greatly. Now, the stray animal indignantly watched the intimate process of the two young men, forcing them to stop. Because the boy abruptly pushed his beloved away, the latter also reverted to his original form. Nevertheless, the tailed guest tried to find out what was happening and why his friend Ray was not sleeping with him that night. Although the white-haired one tried to explain to his friend that he wanted to be intimate with his beloved, the latter simply didn't allow it. Instead, the boy suggested that the two pets go to sleep together, since they had not seen each other for a long time and clearly missed each other. The black cat supported this idea and lay down on the blonde's bed. As a result, the cat cafe worker had to sleep on the couch while the old friend settled in his bedroom. While the stray animal was immensely happy to have this opportunity, the white cat, on the contrary, seemed to be sad because he couldn't sleep with his partner. Before falling asleep, the black-tailed one asked why he had left their neighborhood without warning, leaving him all alone. Baeksu honestly confessed that he had run off to search for the person he had longed to meet. As the conversation continued, the tailed one realized that he had mistakenly thought the white-tailed one was looking for a feline friend, not a human. Now, learning the truth about Yeoul, he was shocked. Although in the past, the shapeshifter had initially spoken of the boy as a different kind of being, the stray had not listened, interpreting the situation in his own way. Only now did the black-tailed one realize that he had been wrong all this time. He had naively believed that finding the person Baeksu missed would allow them to return home together, but now he understood that this was not the case. For this reason, he tried to honestly ask the transformed animal if he ever planned to return to their neighborhood. Of course, he answered negatively, as he planned to live his life with his partner. Upon hearing this, the black cat boldly declared that he would also stay close to the white-haired one, to always be with him. As he fell asleep, the stray animal thought that the shapeshifter and the protagonist were just friends, so there was no need to worry about the future. That night, the tailed one dreamed that he couldn't find Ray for a long time, and even after meeting him with the boy, he couldn't keep up and eventually lost sight of him. Waking up in the morning, the black cat felt terribly exhausted from the nightmare. Nevertheless, as soon as the stray animal opened his eyes, he hurried to find his best friend in the vicinity of the apartment. Of course, he was with the blonde. Watching the sweet interaction of the loving couple, the black-tailed one felt bewildered. When their affectionate actions became more intimate, he grew angry, obviously feeling jealous. Therefore, the black cat decided to interfere with their intentions and soon completely ruin their relationship. A little later, the protagonist was preparing to go to work while his guest remained alone with Baeksu in the apartment. Naturally, the boy was very anxious about this, as his jealousy, unfortunately, had not disappeared. Moreover, he even somewhat envied the black cat for being in the white-haired one's embrace. Nevertheless, Yeoul continued to conceal all his negative emotions to avoid upsetting the transformed animal. However, before the white cat's owner attempted to leave, he was stopped to receive a farewell kiss. Unexpectedly, instead of that, the tailed guest once again bit his face. In a moment, the shapeshifter intervened and stopped his friend's vile behavior. Though worried about his beloved, the latter assured him he was fine and hurried off to work. Left alone with his friend, the white-tailed one tried to find out from the black cat the reason behind the bite. Though the latter lied, claiming he simply wanted to kiss the cat cafe worker goodbye too, the former hardly believed it. Very upset by the situation, Baeksu asked his friend not to act that way again. Though he agreed, he inwardly admitted he would continue biting the protagonist only when the white-haired one was not around. The reason for his vile behavior was, of course, his desire to destroy the romantic relationship between the white cat and Yeoul forever. At work, the boy honestly told his uncle about what had happened, as it was the first time a stray animal had hurt him so badly. The man was astonished by what he heard, but he was even more shocked by the news that the tailed one now lived with him and the white cat. In truth, the blonde was more concerned not about the injury itself but about the guest, who was excessively close to the transformed animal, causing feelings of confusion in the establishment's employee. The abundance of thoughts and concerns due to unintended jealousy deeply troubled the protagonist. Throughout the entire workday, the boy continued to ponder this. It was then he concluded that he needed to name the black cat to try to befriend him. Returning home soon after, Yeoul decided that he first needed to discuss his plan with the white-haired one. In a moment, Baeksu met his beloved, emerging straight from the shower. He confessed that his friend had fallen asleep, so they had a little time to talk alone. Upon hearing this, the blonde joyfully embraced the shapeshifter, having missed him, and this opportunity very much. Unexpectedly, the transformed animal decided to seize the moment and kissed his beloved. The two young men briefly enjoyed the chance to be close to each other, but soon they were interrupted by the tailed guest, who, of course, woke up at a very inopportune moment. The black cat was banging on the door, wanting to be let out of the bedroom, so the boy did so. He was extremely annoyed by the street animal's behavior, but when he saw that it had made a mess in his room, the situation worsened. The cat cafe worker was excessively shocked by what had happened, while only the black-tailed one derived pleasure from it. Unexpectedly, Yeoul couldn't take it anymore and started yelling at the black cat, grabbing it in his arms. However, in a moment, he had to let go because the tailed guest was too cute. It was clear that living together peacefully was impossible, as the stray animal greatly affected the boy's emotional state and tried to ruin his relationship with Baeksu.